Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our fourth live webinar presentation of the day. My name is Michael Joseph. I'm the marketing manager here at Setra Systems, and I'm joined again by Michelle Mendoza. Michelle is our product manager for our critical environments line of products. This webinar is titled Helping Facilities Create Isolation Spaces During COVID-19. We have some very exciting new products, including our AirWatch product, which we'll talk about, and our room pressure monitors, which we're widely known for, have also been a key product throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll talk about those products, and if you have a facility that's critical, or even if you just work with businesses that care about air quality, we'll be talking a little bit about isolation spaces today and air purification and air quality. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michelle, and we'll jump into the agenda.
Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate the introduction. I just want to double check that everyone can hear me okay. I had a little bit of trouble connecting. If not, I'll just give it 1 second to see if there's anything in the chat. Otherwise, I'll assume I'm good and go ahead and get started.
I'm not seeing anything,
okay.
So I'm assuming.
Perfect. Let's go for it. Thanks everyone for your patience there. So I'm looking forward to getting to be able to share with you all today about creation of negative pressure spaces and some of the innovations that we've done and product development that we've done here at Setra in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and how negative pressure has really expanded beyond its typical use cases. I'm going to start out with a brief introduction to negative pressure as it's used in hospitals in the airborne infection isolation room. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about air changes per hour before I switch to how COVID-19 has expanded negative pressure to new markets and how you can create that in your own spaces regardless of what your original setup is. So let's jump into it. Okay, so what is an airborne infection isolation room? If you haven't been working with hospitals before, this may be a new concept for you, but one of the most critical hospital environments during COVID-19 has been the airborne infection isolation room. This is a place where infected patients, whether it's with COVID-19 or other airborne infections like tuberculosis, this is where they're kept in hospitals to ensure the maximum amount of protection for people outside of this space. So other patients, other staff members, other people within the hospital are protected because contagious patients are kept in these airborne infection isolation rooms. The negative pressure is used in these spaces to prevent contaminated particles from spreading beyond this area. The air is also exhausted out, which prevents any recirculation of contaminated air. The hospitals have their HVAC systems designed to create these pressurized spaces. And so you can see the arrows in the room where that's pointing to the direction of where airflow would go because of the negative pressure that's done here. It's negative relative to the hallway, and typical airborne infection isolation rooms are run at a differential pressure of negative 0.02 to negative 0.04 inches of water column relative to that outside area. And again, that negative pressure is key to this isolation and the protection of other people in the area from the contaminated particles inside. Let's jump to the next slide. I want to talk about air changes per hour. This is another very commonly used term when thinking about airflow and air quality in hospitals and in areas where you are looking to effectively isolate people and effectively protect people from contaminants in the air. When a room is negatively pressurized, the air gets exhausted out. So the entire volume of air inside of that space is actually changing over and being replaced with new supply air. In hospitals where this is designed into their buildings, this is all achieved through the HVAC system. Later today, or later in this presentation, I will show you how you can use portable units to incorporate additional air changes per hour in your space. But we'll stick with this example now to help you understand how this is used, how it's calculated, and how it's helping to increase the safety and protection of people throughout these communities. So you can see in the diagram, the airflow out is greater than the airflow in. That helps to create the negative pressure, and it helps to generate the air changes per hour. That flow rate being shown here at 800 CFM in this hospital-oriented example is the flow rate of air that is exhausting the air out of the room, and that dictates the air changes per hour. The other half of the calculation that's needed for air changes per hour is the dimensions of your space of the room. So length, width, and height of the room tell you the volume of air that's in there. You can just use, the actual wall dimensions. You don't have to worry about things like furniture and stuff, getting to that, level of detail. Using the general dimensions of the room and the airflow of the room exhaust, the total airflow, that will allow you to calculate the total air changes per hour that you're generating in this space. If you think about a scenario where you have 10 air changes per hour, then that means the entire volume of air is actually changing over every 6 minutes. There's 60 minutes in an hour. 10 times would mean that it would take 6 minutes for that full air change to happen. So that's a pretty frequent amount of air changes, but that's one of the commonly used air change per hour levels in hospitals and in other scenarios. And if you want to make this even easier, we actually have a preset calculator where you can just enter your dimensions of your space on our website, and that will help you calculate the air changes per hour if you were to use the portable device to create negative pressure that we're going to be talking about today. Oh, if we can go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit more to finish up this topic. ASHRAE and the CDC have guidelines around air changes per hour for airborne infection isolation rooms. ASHRAE dictates the recommended air changes per hour for airborne infection isolation rooms at 12, but there are many other spaces related to patient care that use negative pressure as a way to protect patients that have varying different guidelines for air changes per hour. Again, this is applicable to hospitals. Any increase in air changes per hour is going to be helpful in the mitigation of spreading any airborne infection. The CDC then went ahead and calculated how many air changes you would want to occur in between the use of a room after an infected patient was inside. So if you think about a scenario where you have examined someone who is known to be contagious, to be infected, they're inside of your examination room, that person leaves, you want to be able to thoroughly clean that space and ensure that it's ready for the next person without any risk of anything in the air or anything on the surfaces. So of course you would do a thorough cleaning of the surfaces, but you also want to think about the air, and air changes per hour comes into play here. If you change out the volume of air a certain number of times, the CDC has calculated that will bring you to 99% or 99.9%, depending on where you're looking in the table, of efficient removal of the contaminants in the air. So this is really, regardless of many of the other factors in your space, all you need to know is the air change per hour rate that you are running at, and then you just can use this table to determine how long in between the infected patients you would want to leave to have those air changes per hour running, and for you to be confident that you have effectively removed contaminants to either 99% or 99.9%, again, up to your preference there. The table below highlights an air change per hour of 10. So again, it's that same number there, one air change every 6 minutes. According to the CDC's calculations, you would need to wait 28 minutes in between an infected person and a potentially uninfected person entering that room to assure yourself that you have removed 99% of the contaminants that could be in the air. So that is 4.666 air changes have occurred during that 28 minutes if you're at an air change per hour rate of 10. You can look this up online. It's publicly published by the CDC, and they show, all their calculations, but it's a useful way to think through air changes per hour and how that can help you protect people in your various spaces. So if we can go to the next slide. So this combination of, thinking about the airflow in your space and thinking about negative pressure, so the pressure in your space relative to the outside, has been really has become a lot more popular, spreading, if you will, across multiple different applications with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. We were able to see firsthand because we had a lot of different people reaching out to us for help around negative pressure. If you sat in on the presentation that I gave this morning, you saw that we have a wide range of of room pressure monitors, both positive and negative, of monitors that are taking the temperature of the environment. So a lot of our products help monitor various spaces. And so because of that, we received a lot of inquiries around, okay, how do I incorporate negative pressure into my space? I'm a dentist, or I am a regular doctor that works in a medical office building, not in a hospital, or I have a nursing home or a school nurse's office, and I need to be prepared if someone who is infected with COVID-19 is there or potentially infected. I need to be prepared to protect myself, my staff, anyone else who may be in my building from that potentially infected person. And so we saw firsthand, like I said, how negative pressure expanded beyond just hospitals. So we can go to the next slide. I'll talk about how, so because we kept getting these inquiries, we started to talk to, more of the people across these different and new applications to, discuss what would a solution look like in your space. In traditional hospital settings, like I said a little bit earlier, isolation rooms are set up with the building's HVAC system. They're manipulating the airflows using their HVAC system, and they have the controls and the full, the full setup to do that because that's how they were designed and installed. The HVAC system is what ensures that the pressure inside of the space is less than the pressure outside. But for a building that was not designed for that, we wanted to start to help devise solutions for people who don't have that to be able to think about incorporating negative pressure, because it is a really effective measure against airborne infections. So in speaking through that, we learned that we talked through solutions around HVAC renovations, but what really stood out to us is the potential to use a portable unit to roll into a space and create negative pressure using a standalone unit that can then exhaust air out of that space and generate a negative pressure. So that's where our product development and our innovations actually led us to develop the AirWatch, the Setra AirWatch, which is a portable negative pressure air quality module. I'm going to talk a lot about the different factors of how you can use the AirWatch and what that means. But I just want to touch upon why we went down that path and why we think that it's a helpful addition to to the options that are out there for people to create negative pressure outside of traditional hospitals. So if we can jump to the next slide. So I want to touch on HVAC renovations first. So the reason that we ended up really going down this path of developing a portable unit is because we worked with people and customers that were not in facilities that were traditionally designed to create negative pressure. And we worked with them through their HVAC renovations. We saw firsthand from customers, this example here is from a medical office building in Maine. We saw that they were undergoing expensive, lengthy, and invasive projects hundreds of thousands of dollars of renovations just to create a handful of rooms, you're going to be able to generate those air changes per hour and create the negative pressure with a full-blown HVAC renovation. But we really wanted to explore how we could make that easier for people. So can we jump to the next slide? So that's where the design of the AirWatch came in. So the Setra AirWatch was designed to be a portable, compact, and customizable solution for creation of negative pressure and isolation spaces to meet a wide range of end users' needs. The negative pressure does depend on the airflows around the space. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means practically later in the presentation. But the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because we have the Setralite room pressure monitor, which is our latest room pressure monitor. It's very straightforward, simple indication, green or red, of whether you're achieving the desired pressure in that space. And so that is an integral part of the AirWatch solution. If you want to be able to continuously monitor or check on the pressure that's being generated, a Setralite is a great addition to do that and create a holistic solution. The portable unit, however, the Setra AirWatch, is the one that's actually doing the work to pull the air out of the space. So you can set up an exhaust in your space, and it can go out of a standard window. It can go up into a ceiling tile. It can be incorporated into your HVAC return. And what that does is it pulls the air out and sends it away to create that negative pressure relative to the hallway, that concept that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. It is generating air changes per hour. It depends on your space size. Of course, we have that calculator for you, but in the standard sized office that we tested, or we used for a lot of testing during our design, it generates 14 air changes per hour. So that's pretty significant when you think about some of the guidelines that are out there for airborne infection isolation rooms. We also wanted to make it quiet and unobtrusive, so it's pretty compact and runs at a decibel level that's just a little bit less than a household dishwasher or window air conditioning unit. So we think that this is a way to really help facilities that were not designed for HVAC systems to create negative pressure to incorporate a portable unit that would allow them to do that. So can we jump to the next slide? I'll just talk through a little bit more around the exhaust. So I mentioned that you can exhaust this out a window, up into a ceiling tile, or even incorporate it back into your HVAC system. And you may be thinking, well, isn't that air contaminated? The way that hospitals handle the negative pressure exhaust, or the exhaust leaving an airborne infection isolation room, is that they actually send that exhaust all the way up to the top stories of their buildings. They're pretty extensive venting setups that are, again, designed originally with the design of the hospital. Those are directed up into the atmosphere with various precautions to avoid exposure to people. So even for a person that would be doing work on the roof, there's signage, there is barriers so that people are not exposed to that contaminated air. However, in more practical situations, a medical office building or any other space where you're thinking about negative pressure, you need a more practical way to exhaust the air. So what we've incorporated into our unit is a sterilization method inside of the unit that combines UVC light and HEPA filtration to sterilize the air before exhausting it out to protect any potential exposure of people to that air. So that's why it is safe to exhaust the air out a window, to exhaust it up into a ceiling tile, or to even incorporate it back into your HVAC system, because that purification is inside of that portable unit. If, of course, that air is purified to a safe level, and you can prove that with the solutions that you're looking at, there is an alternative solution to negative pressure that could be incorporated. So if you can jump to the next slide, I'll mention that as well. We consider negative pressure to really be the gold standard of isolation creation, and highly recommend that, of course, if that's possible for your scenario. But sometimes, again, these are all practical solutions. They are going into existing buildings. Sometimes that's just not possible. And so air purification that happens inside of the Setra AirWatch helps create a comprehensive air purification and circulation solution. So you can see in the diagram, if you think about a purification unit, this example shows, two little yellow units that are pulling in contaminated air and then spitting out purified air to help increase the air changes per hour and increase the overall air quality inside of the isolation space. Again, like we spoke about with the CDC table earlier, this is also very effective when you are needing to sterilize and clean a space that has held an infected person before someone else goes inside. Recirculating the air does still increase the air changes per hour. You are technically pulling that air in, pulling contaminated air in, spitting purified air out, and that is changing over the air in the space. So it's increasing the cleaning effectiveness, and it's increasing the safety of the people that would be in that room. If you can go to the next slide. I just wanted to share a little bit more details about what the Setra AirWatch is actually doing for purification. The purification process inside the Setra AirWatch, like I mentioned, uses a combination of HEPA filtration and UVC light bulbs. We have sent the AirWatch out to a nationally recognized testing laboratory where they have done tests to prove out that it is greater than 99.99% effective at killing bacteria, or at neutralizing bacteria and viruses in the air that gets pulled into the AirWatch. So that's why we're confident that there are safe options around where you would then put that exhaust air. We also did our own test around particulate count. Particulate count is a measure of the number and concentration of particles in the air. If you are on the presentation that I also gave earlier, we talked a lot about the particle counters that Setra has. Those are advanced particle counters used in places like the most strict clean rooms for pharmaceutical manufacturing. So we took that advanced particle counter, put it in the test area that we were using in the office, and started to collect data. In the standard office with no air purification, you do have particulates in the air. And this can be anything. This can be dust, mold, viruses, bacteria, any general air particulates that would be in there. It can also be contagious airborne infections. And when we brought in the AirWatch, we were able to show with the data that the purification method of the AirWatch, when it was recirculating the air, actually reduced any particles and any potentially harmful particles in the air within minutes down to less than 99.8% of what was in there previously. So it is it is very effective if you were to have to go through a scenario where you're just recirculating the air instead of creating negative pressure. If you can jump to the next slide, I just want to wrap up on the negative pressure side of things, because again, that is something that we would highly recommend as the ultimate and kind of gold standard way to isolate and protect other people from someone who's potentially contagious. The various different options that are available with the Setra AirWatch make it adaptable to many different spaces. We talked through, and you can see here, different scenarios of how you can set up the exhaust, and the exhaust accessories are included if that's what works for you. Or if you have a unique scenario and you want to provide your own exhaust accessories, that's an option as well to order it without them. And you may have your own setup of an exhaust hose and window adapter that works better for your space. These exhaust solutions are not irreversible installs. These are easily taken in and out. We do not want to make this something that is stuck in a space forever once you install it. It is very adaptable. The unit can be moved around. If you think about a long-term care facility, which has been, one of the areas that has been hit so hard by COVID-19, if they have an infected patient, they would much rather be able to bring a unit to that patient's room and isolate the patient there, as opposed to having to move a patient around to an isolation space. So that's why I just want to emphasize here that it's an extremely adaptable and portable unit. You can see the dimensions here too, and you can see a person standing next to the unit in the photo. It's not large, it's not clunky, it is movable and adaptable. You can also think through if multiple units are needed for a very large space, that's a possibility as well. You're going to, if you use 2 units, you're going to double the airflow that you have available to you, and 3 you would triple it. If that's what's needed in your space, it does scale linearly like that. It's a very another piece that leads, or that shows that it is easily incorporated and adaptable. It just plugs into a standard wall power outlet. It has nothing, no increased power requirements, nothing special going on there. It's very easy to incorporate into any space. If you're one of our international customers, we are working on a international power option as well that's coming in the next month or so. So really customizable for air purification if that's what's needed for you, increased air circulation regardless of how you're using it, and then of course that negative pressure creation with monitoring from the Setra Lite that you can have included with your order of the AirWatch solution. So lots of different options there. Before we take questions, I just have one more slide that I want to go through. Again, creating negative pressure is something that requires something like a portable unit, of course, like the Setra AirWatch, but you do need to think through, okay, what's going to happen in my space now? And so I wanted to share a few considerations here. Negative pressure is affected by and affects the airflows that are going throughout your space, not just in that standalone area where you're using it. You are exhausting air out. You are therefore pulling more air into the space. And so it's important to consider how incorporating negative pressure into your space would affect the space overall. There are companies called test and balance companies that can come in and help you balance the airflows throughout your building if you're going to be creating these new conditions with a portable unit. And then, of course, I mentioned the Setra Lite, and we have a few different iterations on the Setra Lite. Whether you're going to be setting up continuous monitoring or spot checking, it is important to think through, how can I confirm that the negative pressure is actually working? You can set it up and think that you're all well and good, but without some sort of measurement that you can take there, whether it's continuous or spot checking, it would be difficult to know if you've achieved that. And then lastly, if you were to run into difficulties, these are some things that should be considered. How strong is the seal on my space? There's a balance between, completely sealing off every nook and cranny in a room versus having tons of gaps in walls and windows and ceiling tiles and doors that are going to impact the ability of a portable unit to pull negative pressure. So those are a couple of areas to think through if you were to have to go down the path of troubleshooting the creation of negative pressure. And then lastly, as you think about a portable unit like the Setra AirWatch, that exhaust hose run, if you're trying to extend that, beyond 15 to 20 feet, then you should also think through, okay, what does that do to the ability of my unit to exhaust the air at a certain flow rate? So again, it's easy to roll a portable unit into a space, plug it in, and set up a removable exhaust. But you do want to think through, okay, the full effects of that on your building, and then how that, what that would mean for your entire space. So I wanted to touch on those few items briefly so that you can really understand and think through a solution for your space to create negative pressure isolation. So I think that brings me to the end of my slides. I'd be happy to take any questions on the Setra AirWatch, on monitoring, on negative pressure isolation, anything at all.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michelle. That was great. As Michelle mentioned, we are going to open up the floor to any questions. You feel free to use the questions feature right on your toolbar. I'll ask those questions that come into Michelle. So that's now open. Feel free to start asking. Michelle, as we wait for questions to come in, I actually had one. So I can go on Amazon right now and order myself, a plastic air purifier and get it in a couple of days. Now, what is the benefit of AirWatch over just, any old product I can buy on Amazon?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say if you're looking down the air purification path, you're probably not going to find something easily that combines air purification and negative pressure creation. So that's a pretty obvious one, that the AirWatch does allow you to set up negative pressure creation with in your space. In terms of purification, there's also a lot of different solutions out there. Air purification is not a new concept. What the AirWatch does, and I showed you some of the, some of the results of the testing from third-party labs and from our own equipment. What the AirWatch does is it combines HEPA filtration, which is very common in a lot of, consumer-oriented air purification units. It combines that level of HEPA filtration with UVC bulbs that are inside of the unit. They are entrained on the HEPA filter, and so any particles that get caught by the HEPA filter, which is going to be, particles that go really, really small down to 0.3 microns, get caught in a HEPA filter. Any particles that get caught there are then sterilized with the UVC light. And so that combination of the UVC bulbs entrained on the HEPA filter is really powerful and effective to purify your air. And so those are going to be a couple of the most glaring reasons that, that this is going to get you more effective, a more effective solution rather than a consumer-oriented air purification product.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I've watched our engineers design this product, and what amazes me with our solution is, you mentioned the portability. It's not bulky, but they've still used very high quality materials on it. This is truly a product that is easy to set up, but sophisticated enough where things like where the exhaust comes out, where the different air intakes have been very well thought out. So if you have a critical environment, if you are any sort of commercial business, really AirWatch is the best solution out there to just make sure you're protecting yourself and everybody coming into your space. Michelle,
I just want to add one more thing. Please. There, and thank you for the nice words about the product. The ability, to work with us as experts in the space, as people that have been working with hospital airborne infection isolation rooms for years, and we're really, in the trenches with customers during the initial phases of the COVID-19 outbreak, trying to come up with solutions on negative pressurization monitoring. I think that the expertise level that a lot of our technical support and sales team brings is an extremely important factor here as well. I mentioned that the unit is very customizable, but being able to talk through what you have in your space with someone who's an expert in this area, I think will help you create the most impactful solutions and the most efficient and effective ones.
Great point. I just had a question come in that asked if this was going to be emailed to attendees. Yes, this is recorded, and we will distribute it after that recording processes. Following up to what you just said, another question that came in was, are these being used in hospitals, and can they be used to temporarily transform, a patient room into an isolation space?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They are being used in hospitals. Hospitals across the U.S. have purchased the AirWatch and have started using them. We, I believe, have a case study from a hospital in Texas that has been using these for a couple months now, where they have taken traditional patient rooms, a room that was not designed in their HVAC system to be a negative pressure room, and used the AirWatch and set up the exhaust to go either out a window or up into the ceiling. And they're using the AirWatch and the Setra light to monitor the negative pressure and create that negative pressure. So it's actually a good way to be able to expand your capacity of your airborne infection isolation rooms if you're in a hospital. So I know that my kind of angle that I was coming from here throughout the presentation was, if you're not traditionally designed to have an HVAC system like a hospital does, then the AirWatch can help you out. But that's another great example there. So I'm glad that we got that question so that I could cover this, because airborne infection isolation rooms are already set up in hospitals, and so there's only a certain number of them that were built into the space. And so this allows you to add on that extra capacity and move it around.
Yeah, great question. And, we've obviously seen this in more than just hospitals, and that's the beauty of AirWatch. We've seen this in hair salons, seen it in dental offices, long-term care, which you spoke about, which has been so critical throughout COVID-19. I mean, really any commercial business that's opening back up can benefit from having an AirWatch in their space, whether they're negative pressure isolation or just want to do the air purification. And that sort of leads to this next question. So Keith has put a spotlight on air quality in isolation spaces, which we know, but the question goes on to say, is AirWatch still important after a full vaccine rollout?
Oh yeah. So I'm glad that question came across. So thank you. I've tried to shy away throughout the presentation from just talking about COVID-19. So obviously that's top of mind for all of us. But if you think about hospitals, they have had airborne infection isolation rooms for years before COVID-19 was around. There are lots of other airborne diseases that are out there. COVID-19 is just one that is top of mind for us. There's also many diseases where if someone is contagious and they cough or they sneeze, those particles from them are going to be suspended in the air for a certain period of time. So with things like contagious pneumonia or cold or flu, all of those particles can get suspended in the air when someone who has that infection is present. And so it's much more than just COVID-19. It really is it really does add protection for any infection or illness that exists in people's in people's breath when they are breathing, coughing, sneezing, all of the above. So nothing new for us, but it is important to think through that COVID-19 is top of mind at the moment, but it's not the only thing that is out there.
Yeah, great answer. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Again, this is being recorded. Please get any other questions you have in the chat or in the question box that you have there. If we can't get to it in the next few minutes, we'll definitely follow up individually. Michelle, can exhaust from a portable unit be set up with any type of window that opens? I think this is a great question because some facilities might have casement type windows.
Yep, exactly. So actually, do you mind going back a couple slides to the one where we have the picture of the vent that we provide? So that one. Yep. So you can see that metal piece there is what we provide with the exhaust hose. That's actually expandable, and it very easily fits in a standard window that opens up and down, like you can see in the image here. Or it expands to fit into a ceiling tile. Those are, the images from both of those scenarios. But if you have a crank window or a casement window, you can set up any regular exhaust hose. So you can think about, a hose that you could buy for your dryer or a stand-up air conditioning unit, and that can be run to any sort of vent adapter. One of the most common examples that we get questions about and that we've seen are those casement windows or those crank windows. And there are products that are very easily available out there on the market, on Amazon, on any of your preferred retailers, because air conditioning units, of course, have been around for a long time as well. And so it exhausts out the same way that a in-room stand-up air conditioning unit would. And so there are consumer products out there that hook up to or kind of connect to or zip into windows that open in a casement or crank style. And then the AirWatch vent hose can just be run right into that. So If you have a chance to take a look at the data sheet for the AirWatch on our website, you can see the different ordering options, what's included and what's excluded. If this standard window or ceiling tile adjustable vent is not right for you, you can actually exclude that from your order and procure whatever exhaust accessories are going to work better for your scenario. So definitely don't think that you're out of luck if you don't have a standard window that opens up and down. Any adapter that fits with a hose can be run to the AirWatch.
Great, thank you. I think we can slip one more in. You touched on this during the presentation, but I'll ask it again because it came across. Well, first of all, is AirWatch available now? And then the question is, what do I do about other airflows in the space like air conditioning or heat?
Yeah. So yes, AirWatch is available now. You can actually order it online if that's your preferred method. Airwatch.com is our website that allows you to order online. You can fill out a form to reach out to one of our salespeople. And I'm sure if you've been participating in the awesome showcase today, there's been lots of different opportunities for you to chat with people on our team, our really knowledgeable team. So it is available. Definitely reach out to us, especially if you're looking at solutions where you would be incorporating multiple units. We have discounts for volumes, even volumes that go up above 5 units. We have discounts available. So for sure, reach out to us for more info there. And then in terms of the question around the airflows in the space, I know I covered a little bit of this at the very end, but it is important to think about all the airflows in your space. We have a lot of people on our team that are heavily experienced in this area. And our recommendation would be, if you know that you have a heating or an air conditioning forced air system that's going to be kicking on or off depending on the temperature, that's pretty common in a lot of buildings. But what you can do if you're going to need to incorporate AirWatch for negative pressure creation is you can set that system to just run with the fan always on, and then the temperature element that either heats or cools can be the part that kicks on. What's highly recommended is to just have the fan running at a steady airflow, and that allows you to balance the room, if you will, with the airflows that are inside of that space. And that heating or air conditioning system is then at a constant airflow, as opposed to it kicking on and off and disrupting the level of pressure that is being generated by the AirWatch. So that's something we've come across many different times. So great question. It's one that we've heard before. And again, if there's any confusion or additional questions around that, definitely reach out. We have lots of knowledgeable people to talk through that type of stuff.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. I think we'll wrap right there. I want to thank everyone who joined, everyone who asked questions for joining us. If we didn't get to your question, we'll follow up individually. Michelle, thank you for your time as well. And I'm really glad you mentioned through the end of the day today, we have our ongoing Setra virtual showcase in lieu of actually being in person at trade shows due to COVID. So please join that. Please take a look there to see all the new Setra innovations over the last year if you haven't already. Again, this webinar was recorded and we'll make that recording available shortly. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out by our website or give us a call. You can learn more about AirWatch, as Michelle said, at there's 2 I's in there, AIIR watch.com, or you can go to setra.com/AirWatch, AIIR-watch, WATCH. Thanks again, Michelle, and thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.